Hi everyone, this is a video about my How Your Parents Can Play Journey project, which got split into 6 videos over the course of the past 2 years. If you haven't seen the How I Wasted 2 Years Teaching Your Parents This Game video, then go watch it, because that'll give you a basic overview of why the video split into 6 parts in the bare basics of how to teach your parents how to play Journey in 3 hours. For this project, there's a triangle of depth and quality. The top layer is the video with the least depth, but the highest quality. This video fits into the middle layer with more depth and less quality, and it's a never before released discussion video between me and my main 2 non-gamer testers, Alex Socratetris Holmes and Jib Smart. I asked them some questions like how after the experiment, what has changed in their parents' opinions of video games, and what a perfect game for non-gamers would look like. We also keep on mentioning Alex's book, Ludolectic, The Gospel of Game Literacy, which is something he wrote after being part of the Journey experiment. I actually have his book in the background of my video here. These 2 are his wonderful creations. And look, see, it's me, Etra Games, I'm in the book. Both of Alex's books are mostly discussion-based instead of experiment-based, but if you like our discussion in the video here, definitely check out these books in the description below and go support Alex. Anyway, for now, I'm gonna throw some random Journey footage on screen, so kick back, relax, and listen to this in the background if that's your jam. If you like this video, let me know in the comments below so I can see the interest in discussion-style videos. This is kind of like a bit of an experiment, but if I get positive feedback here, I can probably throw more of these together pretty easily. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye. Hello everybody, welcome to this little end of the video bit where I invited Jib Smart, Gyro Gaming, and Alex Socratetris on. You already know him, you watched through this video, and I have a few end of the video questions to ask them to just wrap up this whole project. And yeah, I think we should get started. Should we get started?
We absolutely should get started. I'm
Sounds
tired
good
of
to me.
waiting. You have kept me waiting for too long, Etra.
No, okay. I guess we'll just get right into it then and make it snappy.
Good.
But
Do it.
I was gonna say, so first thing first, after this whole crazy experience, after your parents played Journey, have you noticed any changes in their opinion of video games? A change of demeanor? Like, are they thinking, maybe our sons aren't Satanists? For me, at least in my...
No, see, I play Dungeons & Dragons, Etra. I was a Satanist from the start.
Yeah, so you got to go through that experience. And, I mean, I wonder if the same logic could apply there, but in my house, at least, video games, when I was younger, were the de facto root of all bad things regarding school, social life, and it was really frustrating until I started like seriously talking about them and the barriers and having my parents try them, and then they suddenly weren't as bad anymore. Now, my parents didn't super enjoy any of those initial failed experiments, but like even that familiarity with them now was able to change their opinion a bit. So have you guys noticed anything with your test subjects, any changed opinions?
Jib, could I get you to take this one? I'm going to spend some time ruminating while scratching my chin.
Sure thing. That sounds very appropriate.
Yes.
Look, in my family, my parents had played video games before I did, but they were never really into it. Like when Wolfenstein 3D was brand new, they had both given it a bit of a go and had a good time with it. So growing up, while my brothers and I played a lot of video games, my parents didn't at all, but they didn't really have a poor view of them, as long as we were balanced about how we were using them. My dad would play a lot of Age of Empires 2 when that was newish, and we bonded with him a lot over that, and my mum appreciated that was a really good thing for us, as long as that was in balance as well. But I think something that was newish for mum was seeing that navigating a 3D world can be accessible. It's a really daunting thing to be exploring a 3D world like this, and she's seen us play a lot of games like this, but for her to be able to enjoy it herself without too much difficulty and without any hand-holding, I think that was an eye-opener for her. I think that was a really good thing for my mum.
That it was possibly accessible. Like beforehand, those gates were just completely closed. There's no way whatsoever. But I think that's neat that you're thinking, at least, that she's seeing video games as a medium to be possible now.
That's right. That's right.
So, in
Snippet
terms
of
of my parents and how they had us interact with games, they were very supportive in the beginning, actually. I think they got a pretty positive opinion of them early on because essentially video games taught my brother how to read. He wasn't interested in books at all until he forced himself to read through a video game. And then suddenly he was more interested in reading, and then Harry Potter happened. So reading became more popular even then. And from that, because the parents were very supportive, never really ran into any roadblocks. It's just that the parents weren't in any way interested in games. And before our little experiment, I had at many times attempted to get my folks to play any sort of the games that I was interested in, that I was playing. My brother stopped playing games somewhere in high school, and I just never stopped. And really all gaming was solitaire and chess and things like that on the computer. Mom got into busy work phone games and is still into those. And I think the thing that really changed is that she already had a good opinion of games, knew they could be art and high art and all that, just from me exposing her to all of my arguments for why I love games all the time. But I think being able to see that firsthand was very different and made her actually open to playing some other games. Now, we haven't actually gone and played any other games since then, mainly just because setting things up, my room, my office chair are terrible. She has a bad back. Things need to be accounted for. So, playing through Journey was physically taxing on her, and she still loved it and appreciated it. And so I just want to make sure the next time that we play games together, it's not going to be detrimental to the health of her back or her legs or anything else, really.
And what I was going to say, if I can piggyback right off that reminds me exactly of what happened. I had to cut it from the script, but it's in the pinned comment. When my mom played Portal, near the early part of the games, not near the end, she had the same experience where she has a bunch of back pain, leg issues. She cut her leg open, had to have 12. It was like 9 or 12 separate surgeries on her leg when she was about 14 years old. Metal bars. It was a mess. So she's had leg problems her whole life. She can't sit down for a lot.
Yeah, she's just had to live with it, huh?
And what she did is she was jumping across these platforms and she was having a good time in Portal. Again, that didn't last super, super long, but there was this golden half-hour segment right before we get to these triple jump sections, which I think I'll be showing on screen here. And once she was near the end of her pain limit, she said she had to stop like 5 times. And then she said, after this room, I'm done. And then she enters the next room and she stands up leaning over the computer and plays that way for a solid 4 minutes. But it was still...
Well, that just shows the drive. Even though she was in pain, she still wanted to play and continue. Mm-hmm. And I think to a certain extent, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the recent New York Times article debate. We don't have to get into it so that we can date when this recording actually happened. But I think those experiences demonstrate to the people who haven't gotten into the hobby just how engaging and how valuable we find the experiences. If they're willing to subject themselves to actual chronic pain for longer periods of time just to keep playing, then there's something of value there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And back to, I guess, Jim's mom. Back to what he said about her, about all of that in moderation. That's one thing that's a little terrifying as well, is if people would go through chronic pain to play games, just to moderate that, not make something so hard to control. And I think that's one thing that keeps people out of it. But anyway, moving on from that point, except only kinda, because you both sort of answered it in some part, is my second question here is, why do you personally want people to play video games? And to stretch this question a bit further, why do you think people in general want other people to play video games. And I know Alex actually released a book very, very recently, Ludolectic, The Gospel of Game Literacy. And you addressed this question almost
And I'm a Catholic, so I
exactly.
get to make fun of the gospel, okay?
Ah.
I was born Catholic. I deserve this. I have too much guilt in my soul as it is.
I'll make
So
sure.
I get this. I get to have this, Etra.
I'll make sure to remember that for my own sake in the future. But anyway, so whoever wants to start with that, I know you have like the perfect answer written out.
Oh, I have such an eloquent answer. It's so well transcribed.
So then,
But Jib, do you want to go first?
Well, I reckon if you've already
No,
put some thought into
Jib,
this answer.
definitely. No, please.
Okay, sure thing.
I was big lying. Thank you.
Okay. I personally enjoy games as a kind of escape or as a way of kind of feeling productive, like, hey, I've solved something, hey, I've fixed something. And when I can share that experience with someone else, when I can talk to someone about a game they've played, I get to enjoy it twice over. And so for me, a big motivator in getting other people into enjoying games is that if the people I love and spend time with are playing games, I get to share that experience with them in discussion afterwards. I get to spend more time playing games myself because they value that kind of experience as well. And also, there are whole genres of games that I enjoy, multiplayer games especially, where the experience is enriched by there just being more players. You know, online multiplayer games live and die on whether they have an audience. And so if there are far more people playing games, there's far more room for more of these kinds of experiences to live alongside each other. So for me, I think it enriches the lives of people I love, and it allows me to enjoy games even more. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's
Clap,
all right.
clap, clap,
That's all right.
clap,
I'm trying
clap,
to think of a
clap,
good
clap,
response to that. Enriches their lives even more. Yeah, I don't have any add-ons or disagreements to that. Like, everything you just said, I 100% agree with. So
Awesome.
maybe I'm looking too much for contradictions and disagreements than adding on to that. But I think you kind of very eloquently covered everything. Alex, you're going to have to try quite a bit to top that off.
And after all of my bragging, all right, hold on.
Yes.
Let me limber up my trapezoids. All right. So sort of the crux of the question is a little hard because the reason we want other people to enjoy games is always because of the potential that we see in games themselves, right? But we do want to be more focused on actually the people, right? Not about the art form in this question. And I have two sides to this answer. The first one is just about the nature of the medium itself in like very broad strokes. So, to plug my other book, Controller Revolution, Why Video Games Are the Future of Philosophy.
And you're like different stages of play there, where there's the actually playing the game, the viewing the game, I remember.
Right, different levels of subjective engagement and how people engage with art forms in different ways. Video games are so unique because their engagement is first interactive before everything else. And it seems such a simple point, but it has large implications for how it is vastly different as an art form compared to all other art forms. And to a certain extent, I see games as an apex art form, right? That there's not much you can do on top of a game to make games into some other new art form. Because if you just think about what senses we have to interact with things, we have hearing, sight, touch, smell, and taste. And gaming is the only art form where we're using three of those senses. We're using the sight, the hearing, and the touch. And to imagine an art form that is accelerated beyond games, you can think, well, is there a game that I can smell or a game that I can taste? Smell-o-vision, taste-o-vision.
That's your job, Alex.
And no, it's not. And even then, because of the interactive, the tactile nature of games, I think any art form that even does include all five senses is still going to be a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that interactive part that Jib was talking about of the nature of games makes it dialectical in nature, makes it philosophical. And so I see it as having so much more potential for spreading ideas and different perspectives and helping people to better understand each other. And so the people-focused side of this question is that just because it can create so much more learning, so much more understanding, and so much more compassion for other people, that it would have actively broad, like in broad metrics, effect on how kind and peaceful and interconnected the world can become.
So,
And I think right now we are at such a unique time in video games because we're entering into a new renaissance of what gaming is, in that every single person making gaming hardware is doing something different. Microsoft is all about the services, the streaming and getting things out to lower end devices. PlayStation is holding down the fort with just doing the traditional models and trying to make in-house like exclusive titles that are well funded and finely crafted. Nintendo, again, being
Nintendo.
granddaddy Nintendo, is working more towards getting things in the home and making games accessible for the whole family as toys, as things for fun and entertainment, enjoyment. And just with VR, creating more intuitive ways to interact with games. We're seeing so much divergence in gaming when literally since the Super Nintendo, everything has just been converging onto a couple core designs, two controllers that look almost identical, and the only thing the Switch and the Wii did was split them up into things you hold in the left hand and the right hand, as opposed to one controller. And it's like, we're about to hit a boom of all kinds of games. And I'm worried that there won't be the means for people to actually engage because of the generational gaps, because of the history of failures of video games history. I was redundant there, but you know what I'm saying.
Failures to teach these things. And if we're going to spread out even more, then you're afraid that that failure might just repeat. That's what we need
like
to stop.
even just the failure to stay relevant, to stay interesting to people's lives. What with the Atari shock, the video game crash of 82, 83?
83.
83.
Yes.
Did my senior it's so weird because everything that caused the crash was in 82, and then 83 it actually
is
happened.
When it's actually recorded.
And you know, there was just such a setback there. And in the United States in particular, not so much anywhere else that had games, not so much in Europe, not so much in Japan, but we had such a disconnect here in the United States that it's really disappointing that this art can't be as widespread, but it's getting there, and it's about to get there in a huge way with all of these differences coming out of the gaming industry with our, what generation? 9th generation of games. And it's just so exciting, and I want more people to be able to be on the boat with us.
Yeah, awesome. And be able to experience that. Okay, well then, I guess I have just one more question, and you again.
Sorry, Luke, did you answer that question? Or have I forgotten your answer already?
I have not quite answered the
nobody
question
wants
myself.
to hear Luke's opinion.
It's
not like
you guys are my
It's
guests.
not like he has thousands of subscribers on YouTube.
That's right.
You guys, I guess I probably should answer that. I even told you guys to lean. So I tell you guys to lean back.
If you want Luke to answer that question, make sure to like and subscribe on this video. Let your voices be heard and answer the question yourselves in the comments below.
Yeah. Anyway, so for me, why I'd personally want more people to play video games is just so they can connect over the art form. A lot of what you guys have already said. One other minor tidbit that I think is interesting and especially good to consider is having people approach the STEM fields. I've seen a lot of stuff about how, just like video games, STEM fields are very gender divided right now. And I know a lot of people who go into programming, regardless if they're playing games or not, want to go in there, and then because they've played video games. So I'm wondering if exposing more people to video games, actually, I can cut back. There's a very specific study. I'll link it on screen if I can re-find it, but I read about in one of my psychology books, and it was where they showed how gendered computer science currently is right now by talking about the environment, where they had one computer science course taken in a room where this room was covered in just a normal basic classroom setting, and then the same course was taken, but they were surrounded by video game stuff. And then when they were surrounded by video game stuff, much less women decided to end up joining the computer science course. And I feel like instead of saying, okay, well then let's pull back on that to make it more accessible to people, I feel like the right approach is let's take all that video game nerd stuff and make that more accessible and make everything more accessible in that direction instead.
Also, what a remarkably specific experiment.
Yeah, there was the other thing, or I might just go with this one here. But one thing I especially really think video games can do, I mentioned about connecting, you guys mentioned about connecting, but my grandpa right now is all alone in this pandemic and
Redacted.
and
Oh,
you know what? I should not say the city he is in. Okay,
You
let me
shouldn't.
re-say that. You guys mentioned the different age ranges. Is you have all sorts of elderly in nursing homes right now, and they can't really connect to their grandchildren like children and parents connect to their parents wirelessly. If they had, like, even your parents, I'm gonna move out soon. If I was able to play Street Fighter remotely with my mom, or turn on and play Smash Bros, or whatever I wanted to, Dead by Daylight, etc., with my parents, with my grandparents, that's how I connect with a lot of my friends. Gaming is a communication form between my friends. If they could play Minecraft, that would be a lot of fun to connect with them when I may not otherwise, because we don't really have that form to connect. There was something partially, it doesn't matter. I said my piece.
The games give you
editing.
connectivity with the people you love, and that's very important in this time of everyone having to not do that in an extremely painful way.
Yes. Okay, I forgot that tangent. So anyway, let's get to the final question, and then I can get to editing this.
All right,
So-
Jib, I'm actually going to be the most rude here and take this
ahead.
question first.
Oh, got
Awesome.
it. Go ahead. It's
appreciate
the audience doesn't know it yet. Shh. I
Yeah.
totally asked you
Oh,
these
should
on
I-
the fly.
should
What
I
would
ask
a
the
perfect
question?
game? Oh, yeah, you go ahead.
Should I ask the question of myself?
Yes, ask the question for yourself.
All right, so having used my clairvoyant powers, I know that Luke was about to ask me what the perfect game for non-gamers would include.
Yes.
And I do go into this a little bit in terms of a few suggestions. In my book, Ludolectic, The Gospel of Gaming Literacy, now
Wow,
available
that's
on Amazon.
That's a cool book.
Nice.
Never heard of it.
Oh, shh. Luke with the shade. Okay. I have a few things that I wrote out, so I'm just going to say, number one, I think a game for a non-gamer would be that it has low input complexity, that it doesn't require many buttons to use, like at max 3 button inputs, like a stick, a button, or holding another button, because the complexity that we have with modern controllers is astronomical. We have 20 distinct buttons, essentially, on most controllers, and that's not even including unique input forms and doubling up on different buttons. So, actual inputs are astronomical possibilities, and that's very intimidating. So that simplicity, creating less trepidation, is something I would like to see in a game that is specifically for people who don't play games. And then I would say the other thing is just tutorials. Really strong, interested tutorials coming from the position that the person has no baseline. things that essentially give demonstrations of how it should look when done correctly, give players the space to practice it and mess up and make mistakes without consequences, so that they can then move into a place where they can be challenged without, that fear of doing something so wrong that the game breaks.
If I could jump on that real quick, I feel like we're going in the opposite direction where we need to be for tutorials right now.
Oh, yes. We love intuitive, like non-obstructive tutorials.
Yes.
And every single one of those, if you see it, you know it is designed for people who are already accustomed to games.
Breath of the Wild. Like, I love the intro, but it doesn't tell you what an inventory... As in, then you have to note, like, should game developers be expected to account for non-gamers, especially
I think they don't. And here's where I'm going to be like controversial, because we're on this topic that we love, so we want to say yes. I think the answer is no, because I think it's no, because I think it is entirely reasonable from the developer's perspective to be making games for people who are already interested in and want to buy games. I just think that developers should realize what their goals are and work towards those. If their goal is to have an inclusive game that opens up to many people who don't play, in-house studios like those of Nintendo, where that is their explicit goal, they should and they ought to have really strong tutorials. But I don't think game developers in general should have that expectation on them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think no one needs their first ever game they play to be Dark Souls. Or Breath of the Wild is actually a good example as well, where like the complexity of control is a great thing for established gamers, because there's so many ways you can interact with the world, and it requires complex controls. And then contrast that with another Nintendo game is Super Mario Odyssey, where almost every action can be done with 2 different buttons, because they've got twice as many buttons as actions that you can do in the game. And it's that's a really good thing for brand new players, and something that experienced players can enjoy by mastering, like the throwing your hat, jumping off it, rolling combos that you can do that you're not actually required to do to finish the game. If you don't mind me springing off.
Go ahead.
Please spring. I'm tired of winter. Please spring.
So yeah, I think tutorials are a really good example. And so viewers of this channel of Etra Games will have seen a lot of good examples of that. Just exploring the space of what do non-gamers not know that gamers think they should know. And there's so much that we take for granted. And so to illuminate what's difficult for non-gamers is really helpful, so that games can better accommodate non-gamers.
Jib, do you think there might be a book that people could read that would illuminate to gamers the sorts of things that aren't intuitive to non-gamers? Please, Jib, go on.
Ludolectic is a really cool name, by the way. I haven't read the book, but I really like the name.
Just get ready, because in the book, I even have a term for people who are literate in games. It's
yeah.
The ludolegere.
Yeah, because...
Wow.
Anyway, because you already stated you dislike the gamer term. But anyway, go ahead. What were
yes,
you saying,
I am a
Jim?
ludolegere.
Yeah.
It sounds so much fancier.
It sounds so much more appropriate for a philosopher like yourself, Socrates.
I learned that in law school. If you want to sound smart, speak Latin.
Yes.
You're not smarter, but people will think you are.
So on top of the importance of tutorials is being able to have someone, if possible, next to you, playing with you. I think up until like the PlayStation 2 generation, local multiplayer, split screen was a valued feature in a lot of games. And then when console games started widely getting online capabilities, split screen fell by the wayside. But my non-gamer friend Fred, shout out to Fred if you're listening. I don't actually know anyone named Fred. They're not buying an Xbox to try Overwatch, They're not buying an Xbox to try Fortnite, is probably an even better example. But because if I have an Xbox myself and I have Fred over to play with me, and it has split screen, which it does, he has no buy-in, no obstacles to actually trying games in the first place. He can play alongside me and have my help. I'm cooperating with him. I can pick up the slack where he doesn't know what he's doing, and I can help him into the experience. So I think that's something that Nintendo does pretty well as well, where like Zelda Breath of the Wild doesn't have any co-op in it. Mario doesn't lend itself strongly to co-op, but they still give your little sister or little brother control of the hat. You know, they let you share this experience with someone else. Or if your little brother or sister is really getting into the game, they can control Mario, and you can control the hat and just help them out, keep enemies away from them. You know, so that having ways to share the experience with someone locally without them having to have this huge buy-in, I think is a really important part of making games accessible to non-gamers.
So, for the final point, I love both your responses, but I'm gonna have to end this with violence and chaos because I disagree with both of your assertions that developers.
Jib, I loved your answer. I loved your answer.
I loved yours too, Alex. That was great.
What I was gonna say is I think developers should 110% fully account for people who are non-gamers before they reach their game. And I would say I would claim disability on it. Disability. Let me repeat that. Accessibility. Because if we are going to, and I hate to say the word pressure because we're already admitting that it's a fully good thing, if we're going to say that you have to have a colorblind mode, you have to have a mode that helps out with hearing, you have to have visual indicators on Fortnite now, or else maybe you're going to get potentially sued. I feel like, in terms of accessibility, making games more accessible by having a non-gamer tutorial or a non-gamer mode on a lot of modern titles would go a huge way. Like, I'd love to have the tutorial fully incorporated into every game, like the full non-gamer tutorial, but there is also your guys' argument of, like, why should we reteach things that players already know? Because that seems to be wasting their time. Like, if every 3D game started out with the camera system I keep on using about, like, locking the x-axis, making them move forward, back, right, opening the y-axis, and doing those step by step by step, people would get aggravated by that. But I feel like a solution would be, like, a non-gamer mode. Imagine if Journey had this non-gamer mode where they could hire me as an intern and I could go into probably not Journey but Sky, and you have the option to do a non-gamer tutorial which shows you the basic camera controls and the movement and has you experiencing it and has, like, better UI prompts and everything. So if we're pushing accessibility in ways where people have issues interacting with games physically, why aren't we pushing video game accessibility in the way where they don't have access to the knowledge beforehand that they're required in order to know how to play this?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, like, my first kind of knee-jerk reaction to that is that, like, as a maybe a bit of a completionist gamer, I start a game, I will do the tutorial even if I think it's going to be boring, because I don't want to miss out on any knowledge that's useful to the game. But if it becomes a bit more accepted that there's also going to be, like, a part of that tutorial that can be skipped is going to be just gaming literacy. It's going to be the tutorial for non-gamers. You know, maybe players like me will do it the first couple of games they encounter it, and then after that go, no, I know that this is really just for Fred. This is not for me, and it's okay for me to go straight into, you know, skip that part of the tutorial or skip the tutorial altogether and go into the game proper. And if we see that kind of experience iterated on in more and more games, probably using the stuff that you've done in your videos as a base, Luke, and then there's probably room to build on that further. It'll be really interesting seeing how that improves game literacy rather than the evolution that we have seen in games where games go, like, figure out if you want to invert your right stick and now go, you know?
Yeah.
My tack on for that, I'm going to jump in on you, Luke. There are games that do exactly that, have an unintrusive tutorial space that is entirely separate from the game. And in terms of that, I do think that that is something that should be included wherever possible. And the least accessible games are the ones that really put forward the most time into making those things happen. Fighting games in particular have a training mode, and, like, character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta have separate training rooms that you can usually access either from the start menu or from the shop where you actually buy your moves so that you can practice them. And, even Bayonetta did that sort of thing with its loading screens, turned them into a practice room. But I think that, just to push back, I don't even know if I believe what I'm about to say, but to defend my point, I think there might just be some games that aren't conducive to that sort of thing. Games that are very systems heavy, that are definitely learn as you go because it's just so much that tutorializing it would be no different than just playing the game and bashing your head against it. The Civilization series comes to mind as a game with so many complex systems that to tutorialize the game is no different than just playing the game. And so I just think that some genres of game aren't conducive to having a tutorial that matters.
Or even just like having a sandbox mode, because there's so many different pieces at once, you can't look at those individually as well. Like,
Right.
even if, I know you mentioned Civilization, but even like a game like Catan or a lot of board games, they literally throw all the rules at you at once because they need all of those in place at the same time in order for it to function.
There's a great Auntie Donna sketch. Jib, do you know Auntie Donna?
I don't.
Oh my gosh, you need to know Auntie Donna. Auntie Donna has a video about how frustrating it is to play board games and how everyone loves it anyway. The end.
Awesome. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure, because, Jib, I'm shocked. I'm appalled at your answer. Because what about the controls for non-gamers? I thought you were going to have a big comment on that.
I appreciate you drawing attention to that. Because you and I had talked about this before, actually, when we were talking about the results of my mum's participation in the Journey experiment. My pitch was that my mum disliked that sometimes she had control over the camera and sometimes she didn't in Journey. There are so many games that, like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta are good examples, that are like complex and interesting games where generally they don't give you direct control over the camera, and that's a good thing. The camera positions itself to see the action well, and you're focused on interacting with the enemies around you and enjoying control of the character. I think if more games if more developers would appreciate that direct control over the camera is difficult, and particular direct control with thumbsticks, which are just not well suited to precision, I think developers would be more open to both more innovative and intuitive ways to interact with games and interact with game worlds. So something that people familiar with my channel will have seen a lot is controlling the camera with gyro. My wife doesn't play video games at all, and I was playing Doom 2016 on the Switch. I stopped to go to the loo, and she, as a joke, picked up the controller like she was going to play it. And I was like, yeah, go ahead, play with it. And I had the motion aiming turned on. And basically, she was absolutely terrified of the atmosphere of the game and what was going on. But thankfully, her first encounter was very slow-moving Possessed. And she was able to shoot it in the head with a pistol without difficulty. With no more difficulty than one would in real life with an actual gun, because she was using the controller like that. Whereas when she's tried Mario or Zelda for a little bit, and Zelda gives you the motion controls, but when she's tried to control the camera directly with the thumbsticks, even with a Pro Controller, it just doesn't offer that precision. And because of our history of 20 years of using thumbsticks for aiming and all the work that's gone into aim assist, where the game helps you aim how you think you're aiming rather than how you're actually aiming, we as developers tend to forget that thumbsticks are actually really bad for aiming. And so looking for opportunities, looking for ways that controls can be made easier for players without actually dumbing down the experience or taking away from the experience. There's so much room to explore there. So that's something that I'm really passionate about.
To tag on to that, because I 100% agree about just having more variety or more intuitive controls to the actual actions of the game and how important that is. Like, gyro aiming in first-person shooters isn't just a thing that helps new players who don't play that genre of game, but is actually very integral to very high-level play in first-person shooters. Because people who reach those pinnacles of performance often use gyro aiming for both the large the large gross motor aim movements, and then barely use the thumbstick just for little taps and adjustments at the same time. And that's the sort of thing that you only get if you've really sort of reprogrammed your gamer brain that has learned to use the thumbstick despite how unintuitive it is to go back to something that is so intuitive as the gyro aiming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome.
So what I got from both parts of your response there is you really think that we should go back and kind of see where to tear apart our foundation a little bit. Like, with joysticks being accepted, we've just moved forward with them instead of going with gyro. And then to add on to that, you mentioned the camera controls in Journey. Like, the camera controls in Journey seem to be there by default because that's how all third-person adventure games play. That's what I based my stuff off of. But instead of just saying, okay, let's take this template and build a game on it, it's almost like I heard from you that we should kind of go back and re-examine our templates through a critical lens, and even re-examine our controller templates through a critical lens and see like, hey, with new technology, we can do this instead. Of course, I don't know what this is specifically other than your amazing example of gyro controls, but going back, looking at our foundations with a critical lens because we've just accepted these foundations way too much, and they're not super duper accessible, as we can all clearly see.
Yeah, that's really well put. Tearing up those foundations, because I think the biggest argument against gyro aiming as one example, but the biggest argument against changing the way games are played is that there are a lot of people who are used to playing games the way they are played. And I think my argument against that is it'll be a real pity if a new generation of gamers ahead from now are still stuck with a less intuitive, less fun, less accessible way to play games because their predecessors just were used to that way of playing, instead of having a better experience that we can explore by tearing up those foundations. And I think those foundations, especially as we're talking about accessibility a lot, and it's so good that there's so much conversation around accessibility at the moment, accessibility means still letting players who rely on those foundations play that way. Because gyro aiming, for example, is more accessible to more people, but there's still going to be some people who, due to an injury or something, are just not going to be able to use their whole wrist or arm to aim, and they really are going to be better off using a thumbstick for whatever reason. And it's great that we have put so much time and research into making thumbstick aiming feel as good as it is. So let's offer both options instead of just assuming that players will always want to play with thumbsticks only by default.
Well, anyway, I think that's just a great point to end it on, keeping games accessible. I think that's what we're all for, we're all about, and keep on moving that into the future and all the benefits of opening this art form out to others. So I just want to thank both of you. Jib, you can check his channel, all about his tools he made to help you play with motion controls on just about any game. You can check it over on his channel, Gyro Gaming. Alex, you can find him over at Socratetris, and you can find him in that book we mentioned about 40 times.
You mean Ludolectic, the Gospel of Gaming Literacy?
Yeah, that's the book I was talking about.
And also Controller Revolution?
Yeah.
How video games are the future of philosophy?
Yeah, I think I heard of that one. I heard it's fantastic, and it's
no,
also
never heard of him.
In the
Figure the guy who writes
below.
it is a jerk.
Yeah. I don't think
I heard that
so
somewhere on the internet.
Thank you so much for having us, Luke. And it was really nice to meet you, Alex, and to be able to talk about games in this way.
Oh, yes, definitely. And Luke, you're a sweetheart. You know I love you.
Thank you. You too, Alex.
Respond to my emotions, Luke.
Anyway, okay, shoot, how do I end all my videos off? How do I miss this? It's thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us, and I will catch you all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.